you ever out and about and you suddenly get a pang of melancholy in the pit of your stomach, perhaps brought on by a smell, a song, maybe even just a feeling, and it suddenly jolts you out of the present and into the past? Well, that's called nostalgia, and it's here to hurt us. Sort of. The term nostalgia is derived from the Greek word nostos, which means home and pain, and it was coined by a physician in 1688 named Johannes Hofer, who described it as a disease, the symptoms of which include high fever, irregular heartbeat, debility, stomach ache, and melancholy. In some cases, the disease could be fatal, and it mainly affected Swiss mercenaries who were far away from home fighting battles for foreign powers. Hofer dubbed the condition nostalgia, or homesickness, and said that the cause was psychological, often brought on by an excessive thinking about one's home life, triggered by the sufferer spending time in unfamiliar surroundings. But by the early 19th century, definitions of nostalgia changed, but not in a positive way, because it became regarded as more of a form of depression. And this gloomy view continued well into the 20th century, where in the 50s it was described as a mentally repressive compulsive disorder, and then in 1980, a regressive manifestation closely related to the issues of loss, grief, incomplete mourning, and depression. Whoop-de-doo. It was only in the latter part of the 20th century that nostalgia adopted a bit of a different look, and that was in part thanks to a chap called Fred Davis, who said that people associated it with words like warmth, childhood, old times, memories, yearning. And today, nostalgia is known as a sentimental longing for the past. And it's huge. Yes, our social media driven world has never been so backwards facing, with everything from pop culture, music, media and clothing brands all preying on our need to look backwards. And many studies show that people use nostalgia when they're feeling negative emotions in their present. I mean, one study during the pandemic was literally called The Restorative Power of Nostalgia, Thwarting Loneliness by Raising Happiness During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Yep, it's become our weapon against depression. But why have we got such a love-hate relationship with nostalgia? Well, we have to remember, nostalgia is an escape. Okay, so we know what it is and we know what it does. But why is it so prevalent right here, right now? Well, did you know that living in the modern world can increase your chance of getting depression? And I know that might not sound like anything particularly revolutionary, but studies have shown that over the last 80 years, mental health issues have steadily increased. Modern populations are increasingly overfed, malnourished, sedentary, sunlight deficient, sleep deprived, and socially isolated. And these changes to our lifestyle have contributed to our poor physical health and the increase and treatment of depression. And they call our current state modernity. A continuous concept that begins with agriculture, followed by industrialisation, urbanisation, and ever-accelerating changes in technology and social structure. And no better is this demonstrated than in the beautiful country of Japan. Yes, the Japanese have actually coined the term modern type depression, which is an adjustment disorder affecting everyone who experienced the home video game system, which by my calculations would affect everyone post 1970? Because this is the period where Japan experienced the most rapid socio-economic change that have subsequently affected the lifestyle, behaviour and mentality of the people in Japan. And one term that has become hugely popular is hikikomori, derived from hiku, to pull back, and komoru, seclude oneself. It's where people are deliberately withdrawing from society due to being overworked and seeking solace in the digital world rather than the real one. They are a lonely nation where one-person karaoke and being able to go to a restaurant, be served behind a curtain in an individual booth and not see another soul is hugely popular. But it's not all bad, because Dr. Routledge, author of How Nostalgia Can Help You Live a More Meaningful Life, states that nostalgia can actually help you feel like your life matters and help you make sense of yourself. Because nostalgia is an anchor and helps us find narrative to our own lives. And the great thing about it is that we can use it as a safety bubble against the toils of the modern world. And that's why so many people are adopting Tamagotchis and decorating their house like their grandma would have. But this is where we start to scoot away from nostalgia slightly and explore another phenomenon which is also taking the world by storm in our current generations: Anemoia, nostalgia for a time and place that one has never known. Professor Philip de Brigard at Duke University proposed that nostalgia is broader, and memory is not just a construct of the mind, but a creative process. You've heard of rose-tinted glasses. Well, sometimes our memories are not recordings of what has happened, but our brain creating simulations of those past events. And given the role that imagination plays in memory, it's not a huge leap to propose that nostalgia is based on imagined positive past experiences. Is nothing real? And this kind of imagination-fueled nostalgia is often based on stories and propaganda, and then your mind creates a simulation of what the past might have been like, and then you get a weird yearning to experience it for yourself. And like nostalgia, this is more prevalent if you're feeling dissatisfied with your current situation. And let's face it, we aren't thrilled. But as you've probably guessed, this can also be damaging, because social psychologists and political scientists have started to wonder if anemoia is playing a part in the rise of certain movements like Make America Great Again, or the UK's Brexit, or notions like Bring Back the Good Old Days and the good old values. And this is where we begin to run into the biggest issues with nostalgia and anemoia, because not everyone has equal access to things worth being nostalgic for. For many, the past is not a comforting place to shelter, and actually the future might look like a more inviting abode. Artist Mark Kennedy stated that nostalgia is the death of hope, because hope can only be in reference to the future, not the past. You can't hope for things that have already happened, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. And the great thing about when people have hope is that they tend to take action, and in some circumstances that can actually fuel social change, which is probably a good thing. So sometimes focusing on the future might be more productive than focusing on the past. And I hear you, I should probably take a sip of my own medicine. And this idea of the future brings me onto the concept
of hauntology,
which isn't a theory about ghosts or the paranormal. Kind of. However, it is kind of spooky. Do you remember the story of Scrooge by Charles Dickens and the terrifying depiction of the ghost of Christmas future?
Oh! Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
Well, that's basically hauntology, being haunted by a future that never happened. This notion of lost futures is the sense that the future has fallen under the culture of capitalism, and the social cultural progress that was promised in the 20th century never actually materialised. We didn't get what we were promised. I told you, Mum. It emerged from Derrida's 1993 work Spectres of Marx, in which he argued that the present is always haunted by the ghosts of the past and the unfulfilled promises of the future. Okay, everybody take a breath. We are not going to have an existential crisis today. And so that leads to a cultural landscape where nostalgia and revivalism are predominant, but only on a superficial aesthetic level. God, we love an aesthetic these days, don't we? Fisher also points out contemporary culture's inability to generate new ideas, and so we're recycling past styles and aesthetics, leading to a kind of cultural flatness and sameness where the new is just a reconfiguration of the old. I mean, I can't deny he's got a point. And this sense of cultural recycling creates a haunting effect where the past persistently echoes in the present, and we get a kind of cultural and social stagnation, which could be argued by the atrocious funding of the arts, but that's a rant for another day. But what this does offer us is a huge explanation for social media's need for nostalgia and anemoia, because the way that we experience artistic time and historical authenticity is kind of fading away into a confused mess of rose-tinted beauty. And capitalism has a lot to answer for. No surprises there. Because hauntology is not just a philosophical concept, but a cultural condition of late capitalism. Because capitalism's essential feature is motive to make a profit. And with that becoming our new form of humanity, a business ontology, because ontology is the state of being, and so hauntology is kind of a play on that word, we're struggling to conceptualize anything new or original because it's all recycled. The future is kind of suspended in time, and new art isn't funded. But it's not all doom and gloom, because if you have a good understanding of these concepts, why you sometimes tend to want to look backwards more than forwards, maybe that will help us make the future something that we actually want to be involved in. I mean, the great thing about the current generations is that they are trying to ignite social change in the same way that past generations have done. It's just that we've reached a kind of bottleneck where nothing's really moving anymore, but that can be changed. And the way we can change is by finding balance in our past, present and future, and not spending too long in either. Obviously, you're always in your present, but you get what I mean. It's about being mindful in the here and now, in the concept of what has been, in the hope that that can influence what's going to be. Well, look at me. And so don't be downhearted, because at the end of the day, the more you know. But screw capitalism.